If you've been in our church any amount of time, you've probably heard me talk about people being on a journey. Now, if you have been raised in another church background, specifically an evangelical church background, you've probably heard praying the prayer emphasized, meaning you share about Jesus, you share about his death, his resurrection, that it's for you, that you need to make a decision if you are going to follow Jesus or invite Jesus into your heart, is some of the language. And the way that that's codified is by praying the prayer. I get you to pray the prayer. Now, listen, I'm never going to be somebody that says that somebody shouldn't pray under any circumstance, but we've built an entire theological, philosophical framework around praying the prayer, making a decision to follow Jesus or have Jesus into your heart. And strangely, that is nowhere in the scriptures. There's nowhere in the Bible that someone is led to pray a prayer of commitment to follow Jesus. That doesn't exist. Now, that way of thinking is what in set theory would be called a bounded set, meaning there's a circle, and we're trying to figure out who's in and who's out. And the way we can figure out who's in is if we can get them to pray a prayer, usually quoting from Romans 10:9 and 10, that means that someone has gone from death to life, from dark to light. And there is Bible for a bounded set, meaning that there's a circle in and out, like you move from out to in. The challenge is, when you read the scriptures, it's difficult to measure out to in because many of even the characters of the scriptures don't look like they move very well from out to in, or they look like they're in when they're really out, or they look like they're out when they're really in. And so though it might be true there is a bounded set, that there is an in and out, to use a philosophical word, epistemologically, meaning like to the skin, to measure what's happening, to feel what's happening can be difficult. I'm sure if you've been in church any amount of time, there's people that look like they know what they're doing, and it turns out that they're really far from God. There's people that look really far from God. As you connect to them, you begin to realize, man, they're pursuing Jesus white hot. You see this in Jesus himself. People are moving towards him that shouldn't be. They're supposed to be out. There's people that should be moving towards him that are religious, that are moving away. And so another analogy in set theory would be not just bounded set, a circle that tells you who's in and out, but centered set, meaning that Jesus is the center and people are either moving toward or away from him. Now, they might be really close to him theologically, but they're moving away. They might be really far from him morally and theologically, but they're moving toward. That's what you see in Jesus. When Jesus in the parable of the two sons tells a story of one son who says, I'll do what you say, but then doesn't do it. And another says, I'm not going to do it, and then they end up doing it. And Jesus says, which one obeyed the Father? And he says, in the same way, as I look at you guys, you religious Pharisees, compared to a prostitute or a tax collector, you seem really close, but you're moving away because you don't do what you say you're going to do. And you're not open to grace and humility. And yet I look at the tax collectors and the prostitutes, and they're moving toward me. And he says it just like this. He says, the tax collectors and the prostitutes are crashing into the kingdom of heaven ahead of you. It's a picture of momentum and direction. Now, how does this change how we think about sharing our faith? Well, it changes everything because it means that we're not just trying to push people towards praying a prayer, making a certain kind of decision. We're lifting up Jesus constantly and showing how attractive and beautiful he is, believing that inherently people will be drawn to him. It means we're not trying to get people to join a religion. We're getting people to fall in love with and be infatuated with Jesus. Now, this is harder because it means that we're not just teaching people a shtick that we get people to sort of sign on the dotted line. It means that you yourself have to be infatuated with Jesus. It means that Jesus captures you. He warms your affections. He draws you into a life that's different than the one you live, and you're asking people to join you in that momentum. Well, it means, in effect, you're on display, and the life that you have with Jesus is on display. It means you have to ask them really hard questions about yourself. What do you love about Jesus? Do you believe that if people could get a glimpse of Jesus, they would be drawn to him? He says this, Jesus says this in John chapter 3, if the Son of Man is lifted up, people will be drawn to him. He makes an allusion to the serpent in the desert with Moses. So here's a simple question. How close are you to walking with Jesus? How much is he driving your affections? What do you love about Jesus? And you'll share what you love. As you love Jesus more fully with your life and you love people, you'll speak of Jesus, and we'll talk more about that, but you'll speak of Jesus because you love him. People talk about what they love. And the question for me isn't how do we get people to share their faith, but the question is why aren't they? And they aren't because either they're not affectionately connected to Jesus or they don't deeply love others. So, we have some things for you to consider, to write about, to process, that make you start to ask, how much is Jesus truly drawing me? And what would it look like for me to just draw people and speak of and exhibit a life with Jesus that I'm asking people to just move toward him, not kind of fit some manufactured box? So there's some things for you to process as you think about seeing from a centered set world, not just a bounded set, as we're living life with Jesus and drawing people to also follow him.